only occasionally. The Iron Dome system effectively has taken down most of those rockets, but people have been asked to move to safer areas. But earlier today, I was at the front lines of this conflict where there was a massive movement of Israel's armored columns from the Merkava tanks to the infantry combat vehicles to troop carriers. We bring you this ground report.
The India Today team right now is at the front lines of this conflict. These are the powerful Merkava tanks of the Israeli army, and these tanks have now been mobilized. We are right at the front lines. Watch around me as the howitzers, the tanks and the infantry combat vehicles of the Israeli army are all slowly getting mobilized, and all of it is happening right here with the flags of the Israeli army. These soldiers are now prepared. The mobilization has already taken place and the forces are now moving forward. Their deployment, their locations constantly being changed, and an element of surprise is maintained on the ground. They are moving forward very, very quickly, very capable tanks and very rapidly, and as you can see, these tanks are rolling forward and preparing for to launch its intensified. The tanks of the Israeli army that are now being mobilized from only military movement that is permitted here. No civilian movement is permitted here. We are permitted to come here because we have a special power to come. These are the front lines. This is absolute front line of Israeli military deployment and location. Behind these very powerful tanks, locked and loaded. Some of these tanks were initially deployed at the front line where there was a breach in the fence. That breach in the fence was where the terrorists had infiltrated from. So these tanks were keeping an eye. They were keeping a hawk eye on any infiltration that was taking place to prevent it and to pounce where it take place. But it's more than a regiment of a tank that's behind us. Perhaps one could see perhaps 10 tanks too, but in this case we counted a large number of tanks, more than a regiment that has gone in, and towards the front line. We are not very far from this movement. Very clearly make out that these tanks are moving in big numbers to be able to dominate the area where they're deployed. Just a short while back, we also saw movement. We were reporting on the movement of infantry combat vehicles in this area. I want to show you how these tanks are moving all along this area. So anytime now, the moment those instructions are given, Israeli forces will move in. India today is right at the front lines of this battle in West Asia, getting you the latest reports. We were the first to show you how air attacks were intensifying, how artillery was pounding Hamas bases, how armor was moving forward, and now how these infantry combat vehicles, and behind them the special forces locked and loaded, ready to go and decimate the Hamas terror. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the army chief, they've both been very clear. This country is on the same page with one objective. That one objective is to completely decimate the Hamas and ensure that Gaza Strip can never be used to launch terror attacks on this part of Israel. The southernmost part of Israel remains most vulnerable. But despite all this movement, despite the air attacks and the artillery pounding, ground troops will have to go in because even now Hamas retains the capacity to strike. Rocket attacks have been happening inside Israel. Even yesterday, till very late at night, we were near Sridot and rocket attacks were happening, though the Iron Dome was able to interdict and destroy most of the incoming rockets in the sky itself. But a couple of rockets did fall, one close to a hospital, one on the road harmlessly, but at the same time, the threat of rocket attacks still remains. We've been speaking for the past half an hour, and even before we got here, the armor movement was happening. Mechanized infantry columns have been moving, the special forces have been moving, the ground forces have been moving, and all in full public play. It just shows how massive is Israel's response going to be. One of the officers we spoke to told us that this is the fastest ever mobilization in the history of Israel, with 300,000 soldiers, with 3 lakh soldiers being mobilized in a couple of days, battle ready, locked and loaded and ready to go. That's exactly what Israel intends to do. This is day 7 of the deadly terror attack launched by Hamas, in which 1,200 people were massacred, more than 1,200, and more than 3,000 injured. Israel is still counting its losses, but resolute in its will and decision to decimate Hamas and ensure that the Gaza Strip no longer poses a threat. Hamas no longer poses a threat to people living in this part of Israel. Gaurav Sawant in southern Israel for India Today.
The Hamas terrorist attack on Israel took place with military precision. An eye on detail. For example, when hundreds of terrorists came into the Israeli territory, whether in pickup trucks or in minivans armed to the teeth, there were other vans that followed full of ammunition. They were loaded to the teeth, armed to the teeth, and they had replenishments. They didn't have to go back to the Gaza Strip to get more ammunition. Vehicles carrying ammunition came with them. Additional rifles, their medical teams also came with them. But that's just one part of the story. Look at how they're making rockets. Open source intelligence. India Today's open source intelligence now is in a position to reveal that Hamas terrorists planned for this massive terror strike for close to 2 years, from training of the terrorists on use of power gliders to getting rockets in place, to have more than 5,000 rockets being fired in this area just a couple of hours, and then continuing with those rocket attacks even on day 7 goes on to show the intensity of the preparations. That's not all. The terrorists had also all along planned to take hostages. We bring you more in this report.
Civilians paying the highest price in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The terrorist group initiated it. Ordinary Israelis targeted, maimed and killed when Hamas launched its unprecedented guerrilla-style terrorist incursion into Israeli territory on October the 7th. Civilians in Gaza plunged into a crisis as the Israeli military bombs their territory, choking supplies to the tiny enclave, home to 2 million residents. On its part, Hamas has sought to portray civilian casualties as accidental, collateral damage. In statements issued to local outlets, the Hamas claims its so-called Palestinian freedom fighters aim to avoid targeting ordinary Israelis. Evidence, however, suggests otherwise. A purported 14-page operational document discovered on a Hamas operative's body within a pickup truck by first responders has been shared by an online group of first responders. Labeled top secret, apparently by Hamas, the document suggests attacks on civilians were part of a well-thought-out plan. A plan the Palestinian terror group hatched as early as October 2022. The strategy, as explained in the document, involved raiding Israeli settlements called kibbutz, the assault to be led by a commander, and 2 squads, each consisting of 5 attackers. The raids on the kibbutz, which are basically self-contained communities, carried out with precision. Now take a closer look at point 7. Hamas operatives, led by their commanders, specifically instructed to take soldiers and residents as hostages for negotiations later. A section in the same document noted potential presence of approximately 1,000 civilians in another Israeli settlement along the Gaza Strip. Survivors recount the horror they witnessed firsthand when the Hamas invaded Israeli territory briefly last Saturday. Many civilians accuse the Israeli government of failure.
I want answers from the government. It's not possible. My service was there. There was always people prepared for things like that because it's the nightmare of all the soldiers there. It's not possible. The party was authorized by the IDF and by the police. This is something, it's not an accident. There's something more serious happening here. And we want answers to our questions from the government.
Hamas's planning dossier provides a detailed insight into the intentions behind the attack. 150 hostages currently in Hamas custody in the Gaza Strip. A plan written, drafted on paper and executed on the ground. With Ankit Kumar, Bureau Report, India Today.
After more than 1,200 innocent Israelis were killed in the Hamas terror attack, one would have thought that the entire world would have united to condemn not just the terror attack, but also Hamas as a terrorist organization. But sadly, that isn't true. It's not just in the Middle East or pockets around where there are several who are standing with the Hamas against Israel, but then there are also areas in Europe and in the United States of America. For example, in France, there were protests in favor of the terrorists, it seems. Also, protests on university campuses in the United States of America. Clearly, there's a big battleground in the world, even as you see these images behind me of Israeli army movement and massive Israeli army movement that is taking place towards the borders here.
The war between Israel and Hamas has left the world divided. Protests have erupted across the globe. Some are supporting Israel, others are in solidarity with Palestinians. After Sydney illuminated the Opera House in the colours of the Israeli flag, hundreds of Palestinians marched to the iconic building with flares and set Israeli flags on fire. Anti-Semitic slogans were also raised. The United States is on alert. Campuses in America have become flashpoints with protests over Israel-Hamas war raging on. At the Columbia University, 2 groups of students, one backing Israel, another supporting Palestine, faced off.
People in Israel are suffering, our family in Israel is suffering tremendously. I mean, you know, we take for granted here in America that we have schools, send our kids to schools, we send our kids to synagogues, we just live a free life, and it's starting to change over here. Things are getting very scary over here, and we're starting to feel a little bit of how they feel every single day over there, threatened.
Today, I feel like that CUNY, they need to be more responsible. They need to speak up for Palestine. They need to condemn what Israel is doing. It's not okay. And we have so many years of history that is just completely being ignored. And I feel like that by speaking up today, we can really bring a change.
Their ability to launch thousands of missiles.
While university officials blocked public access to the campus, many took to the streets of New York. Several hundred people defied a police ban and demonstrated in Paris to denounce Israel's military actions in Gaza. Many wore Palestinian flags around their shoulders and chanted, "We are all Palestinians." Riot police later sprayed tear gas and water cannons, chasing the crowd away. France has now banned pro-Palestine rallies.
Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
Pro-Palestinian protesters also staged demonstrations outside the US consulate in Johannesburg. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered in the heart of Brussels in a powerful show of support for Palestine. The crowd carried Palestinian flags, images of the bombardment in Gaza, pictures of children and journalists who were killed, and chanted, "Freedom for Palestine." Rallies took place in the capitals of South Korea and Japan too. In South Korea's capital, Seoul, outside the Israeli embassy, hundreds of people staged a rally to denounce Israel for what they called oppression of Palestinians. Some demonstrators gathered near the Israeli embassy in Japan to call for an end to Israel's bombing of Gaza. Many of them carried placards written in English and Japanese, calling for peace and an end to the violence. The century-old conflict has created new fault lines in an already fractured world. Bureau Report, India Today.
The situation on ground here in southern Israel remains extremely tense. There's massive movement, as you can see right behind me. Israeli forces are moving right to the front lines, but then the police and other forces are also protecting the interior areas, whether it's areas around the Zikim beach or in Ashkelon. The threat is not just from the Hamas rockets, the threat is also from power gliders and Hamas terrorists with assault rifles coming in to carry out more terror strike, harming not just Israeli civilians, but also Israeli forces as they move in big numbers towards the borders. We will continue to track developments on this big story, but that is all I have for you on this special broadcast that comes to you from Sderot in southern Israel, as you hear the boom of this gunfire, these howitzers that are pounding almost relentlessly. We will continue to report from ground zero, but for the moment, many thanks for watching, and for all the latest news and updates, keep watching India Today.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company. Israel-Hamas blood feud returns. All-out war engulfs West Asia.
Look at the massive destruction. So this is just a matter of 5 minutes.
Fearless reportage and exclusive news breaks.
You just heard those sounds of the blast.
Bombed out house here in Ashkelon in southern Israel. India Today is the only team which is reporting from the border.
India's biggest conflict reporters, live and exclusive. West Asia War through cameras.
I feel like that CUNY, they need to be more responsible. They need to speak up for Palestine. They need to condemn what Israel is doing. It's not okay. And we have so many years of history that is just completely being ignored. And I feel like that by speaking up today, we can really bring a change, and maybe on an international level, because Palestine will definitely be free. It's gonna take time, but this is a small start, and I want it to grow bigger. And as long as we all just keep speaking up about it, it can really change.
People in Israel are suffering. Our family in Israel is suffering tremendously. I mean, you know, we take for granted here in America that we have schools, send our kids to schools, we send our kids to synagogues, we just live a free life, and it's starting to change over here. Things are getting very scary over here, and we're starting to feel a little bit of how they feel every single day over there, threatened.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a B&P Group company.
भारत दशकों से क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म का सामना कर रहा है। आतंकवादियों ने भारत में हजारों निर्दोषों की जान ली है। संसद के नए भवन के पास ही आपको भारत की पुरानी संसद भी दिखाई देगी। करीब 20 साल पहले आतंकवादियों ने हमारी संसद को भी निशाना बनाया था। टेररिज्म की परिभाषा को लेकर आम सहमति ना बन पाना, ये बहुत दुखद है। आज भी यूनाइटेड नेशंस में इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन ऑन कॉम्बैटिंग टेररिज्म कॉन्सेंसस का इंतजार कर रहा है। कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स और कन्फ्रंटेशन से आज दुनिया संकटों से जूझ रही है। इन संकटों से भरी दुनिया किसी के भी हित में नहीं है। मानवता के सामने जो बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं, उनका समाधान एक बटी हुई दुनिया नहीं दे सकती।
The battleground is heating up and our warriors are in top form. With the World Cup in sight, India is ready as we build up to India's best coverage. Join us to cheer for the men in blue. India Mange Ek Aur World Cup, the battle of champions.
Israel-Hamas blood feud returns. All-out war engulfs West Asia.
Again you hear another blast.
Fearless reportage and exclusive news breaks.
तो यहाँ से एक ग्राउंड रिपोर्ट दिखा रहा हूँ। किसी भी समय यहाँ कुछ भी हो सकता है।
India's biggest conflict reporters, live and exclusive.
You just heard those sounds of the blast. Is the real images. When look at the massive destruction.
West Asia war through India Today cameras.
In politics, everyone has an opinion, but I have the data. Whose stock is rising? Whose graph is falling? Track India's political stock exchange. Unmatched, unmissable data analytics. The only show on News TV when numbers do the talking. India's most credible poll tracker. The Political Stock Exchange with Rahul Kamal only on India Today.
are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
Co-powered by PolicyBazaar.com. हर family होगी insured.
Good evening, viewers. You're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Chaudhary. As we are transfixed with what is happening in Israel and Gaza, there is a story that is unfolding in India's top court, where it comes down to abortion and rights of women over their own body. It's made an entire debate rage on pro-life versus pro-choice. So what really is going down, especially in a country, and one has to say in a country that is the most progressive when it comes down to abortion laws. There is one case which has split not just the entire country but India's top court. In court for the last 2 weeks alone, a plea of a 26-week pregnant woman. When she came in, she was just 24 weeks pregnant and 1 day. Just 1 day more on what is the permissible limit. A two-bench court heard it and heard her case. They allowed her to abort. However, AIMS, the medical unit at the behest of the center, came back with the plea that the fetus she was carrying was viable. Then there was a split verdict where the court was concerned, which is the two-bench court. And then the case has now gone to a larger bench where the Supreme Court comes into question. This is the story.
The big pro-life versus pro-choice debate. Why India and its top court are split. A case that is India and the Supreme Court divided. A three-judge bench of the Supreme Court in a fix whether a woman who's over 26 weeks pregnant should be allowed to abort her fetus. A bench comprising Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud, Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Manoj Misra, hearing an application filed by the central government. After, a two-judge bench delivered a split verdict in the case. The split verdict came a day after the two-judge bench had allowed the woman to medically terminate her pregnancy. Justice Chandrachud asserted that while it's cognizant of the autonomy of the mother, the court must also think of the rights of the unborn child. Who is appearing for the unborn child, the court asked, emphasizing that the fetus is living, viable. The court is hearing a petition filed by a 27-year-old married woman who demanded permission for terminating her pregnancy, claiming that she is neither physically, mentally, psychologically, or financially prepared to continue with the unwanted pregnancy. The court has now asked the All India Institute of Medical Sciences to submit a report on the fetus and the pregnant woman by 16th October. The Apex Court has asked AIMS to study if the fetus is suffering from any substantial abnormality, if the medicines that the woman is taking should have any effect on her carrying the pregnancy further. The mental and physical condition of the pregnant woman also be accounted for, and if there is an alternative medicine for postpartum psychosis. India as a country has the most progressive abortion laws. However, the case has now led to a raging debate, and the time is ticking, crucial for both the pregnant woman and the fetus. Feticide versus mother's autonomy. Abortion, my body, my rights. Top focus on To The Point this evening.
Cut across to our panelists. I want to immediately go to my colleague Nalini, who's joining us in the studio. Nalini, would you elucidate on why is it that India as a country with one of the most progressive laws when it comes down to abortion finds itself in a bind, where not just the country, the top court is also divided on which way to go in this particular case?
Well, Preeti, it's a very interesting case that's come up before the Supreme Court, essentially because just a few days back when the matter came up before a two-judge bench that comprised of two women judges, the judges themselves were not able to decide as to whether or not they should allow this 27-year-old married woman to terminate her baby or not terminate her baby. Now, the case has basically come to the top court because this woman was 24 weeks and 1 day pregnant when she realized that she was pregnant, and the MTP Act, which is the law that deals with medical termination of pregnancies in India, puts the deadline for abortion that is permissible without any extraordinary circumstances at 24 weeks. So considering that she was 1 day late, she had to approach the court to get her pregnancy terminated. And since then, the matter has been pending before the top court, which is extremely crucial to point out because every single day that the child remains in her body is an additional day that she is going to be pregnant, which is going to make the matter even more complex. Now, both the woman as well as her husband have categorically stated that they don't want to birth the child. They already have two children, two very young children, I must say, I think 4 years old and 1 year old. And along with that, the woman is not in a mental state. She suffers from a lot of mental issues that she does, so she does not want to birth another human being, in addition to the financial crisis that the family probably already is in, is what they've told the top court. But at the same time, the Supreme Court had first actually allowed her to terminate her pregnancy. They'd even passed an order to that effect, and they had asked a medical board at AIIMS to examine her. After the AIIMS medical board examined her, they wrote back to the government and they told them that during her examination, it was found that the fetus had a viable heartbeat. So the heartbeat needed to be stopped before the termination of pregnancy could be carried out, and that's why they'd written to the government. The government surprisingly came rushing back to the court saying that the fetus is viable, is the opinion of the medical board at AIIMS, which is why the earlier order should be recalled. In fact, ASG Aishwarya Bhati, who is representing the government before the top court, has gone to the extent of saying that if the mother in this case carries the baby full term, then the government will take care of the baby and eventually put it up for adoption. But at the same time, the mother will have to birth the baby, and that will obviously come with its own set of complications, including postpartum symptoms and all of the complications that come along with that. But at the same time, the parents have categorically said that they don't want to have a baby. And once the two women judges of the Supreme Court could not arrive on a decision, because where on one side a judge was pro-life, the other judge was pro-choice, the matter is now before the Chief Justice of India, a 3-judge bench being led by him, and they are looking into it. It's going to continue on Monday, and it remains to be seen how every day might make the matter even more complex when the court's hearing it.
Well, even more complex. So what I'm going to do is right now, Nalini, stay on with me. I want to cut across to Dr. Taruna Dua, Senior Consultant and Gynecologist. She's joining us live. Ms. Dua, I want you to give us an understanding. A 26-week pregnancy where every day matters, going ahead, if you're looking at a termination, and also vis-a-vis the mental health of this woman, where at one point she's also tried to take her own life. She's clinically depressed, she's been on medication, she also has 2 children, where she says she can barely take care of herself. Both physical and mental. What are we actually looking at?
Yeah, so a very good evening and thanks for having me here today. If we have known the background of the whole thing, we know that it's a viable pregnancy. It's about 26 weeks, right? So according to the MTP Act of India, which was initially passed of 1971, according to that, termination was always allowed till 20 weeks. And from the range of 20 to 24 weeks, if there was a very well-defined reason for termination, this could be done by taking a signature from 2 doctors, right? So initially it was even up to 20 weeks, we had to have the signature of 2 weeks, the signature of 2 doctors. But now that the MTP Act was amended in 2022, the provision has come that signature of 1 doctor is enough for termination up to 20, and in the range of 20 to 24 weeks. If there is a definite reason why we need to abort that pregnancy, the chance of MTP can be taken. And it is very right in saying that India is quite advanced as far as its MTP laws are concerned. There are a large number of countries which do not allow the MTP. Once the pregnancy has happened, whatever the situation, the child has to be born. But yes, we have to admit that India is very advanced as well as far as the MTP law is concerned.
No, but
so considering this particular case, it is 26 weeks pregnancy. So it is a way advanced pregnancy. Definitely the fetus is viable, and there is no abnormality as of the fetus as far as we are concerned.
But you know, doctor, isn't the fetus, doctor, I have a question. Isn't the fetus viable from 8 weeks onwards? Because after 8 weeks, the fetus in any case has a heartbeat.
That is that it's a live fetus. Viability means once the child is born, the fetus is born, whether it has the potential of living a normal life or not. Because up to 20 weeks, definitely we used to consider, according to our old MTP Act, 20 to 24 was a grey zone. After 24 weeks, definitely the child is viable and child can be saved if supportive measures are given. But so there is a difference between a live and a viable child. Live is that the heartbeat is there. It will be live even at 8 weeks. It will be live at 15 weeks. But once we say viability, viability means it should be able to remain alive once it has come into this world. You know, so viability is only after 24 weeks.
Right, doctor.
And as of this case, it is about 26 weeks. So definitely if we give the supportive measures, there is a very high likelihood that the child will survive. Maybe it will have the complications of prematurity, but it is a viable pregnancy.
All right, so it's a viable pregnancy, but in all of this, what one doesn't quite think about or has thought about is what the mother or the pregnant woman in this question wants, you know, because it's, instead of using the word mother, it's better to use a pregnant woman, because she's very clear. She's adamant that she wants the pregnancy terminated. And that is where Trisha Shetty, you know, having right over your own body, whereas pro-choice versus pro-life debate kicks in.
See, there is a right of the mother.
Trisha, ma'am, we are speaking to Miss Shetty. Go ahead, Miss Shetty.
You know, I want to go back to another quote of XYZ versus the state of Maharashtra, where a minor was allowed to terminate her pregnancy in the 26th week, when the courts considered her socioeconomic condition as well as the impact that the pregnancy would have on her mental health, right? So we must recognize that, yes, we're really grateful to be in a country like India where we understand the ever-evolving need for law to adapt to current socioeconomic circumstances of women. And I think, you know, the courts here have always consistently, more often than not, done a good job when it comes to recognizing that right to liberty, which is personal liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution, protects a woman in terms of making fundamental decisions about her autonomy, about her reproductive choices. And we've seen it be reestablished time and again, you know, then be it in 2021, where the amendment was made, as you rightfully highlighted, saying not just a mother, but any woman, right? Any woman and a partner must be protected, regardless of whether they are falling under the category of marriage institutions or not, to have right to reproductive care. Here, when the mother, as well, when the woman and her partner are both saying, we are not medically fit, we are not financially fit to carry forward this pregnancy to term, and you're seeing an extenuating circumstance when the center is having to intervene, saying, we'll take care of your adoption, I think there is a certain level of insensitivity to not account for the mental turmoil and anguish that the woman will continue to be subject to. Should she be forced to carry forward her pregnancy, right? Justice this did demand, why was there a delay of 27 weeks? But she's saying that she didn't anticipate getting pregnant right after the delivery of her second child. So I think we must paramount take into consideration who is carrying said fetus. We're talking about two people, the woman and her partner, who are currently very much alive. And if medical doctors permit a safe abortion in this case, I think we should consider that her right to choice should paramount the, you know, the right of a fetus, if it is medically cleared.
You know, I want to get Deepa Ishwar into this conversation. Deepa Ishwar, pro-life. Deepa, the fact is, you know, let's put this in perspective. This is a woman who is mentally ill. She's suicidal. She has made it very clear that she can't take care of herself, leave alone another child. This is a woman who had no idea she was pregnant because she has a